Noah bought a stock at $80 a share. It's sitting at $34 now. He hasn't sold. Not because he thinks it's going back up, because selling would mean admitting the first $80 is actually gone. There's a name for exactly what's keeping Noah in that stock, and it's not hope, even though it looks like hope from the outside. It's called the sunk cost fallacy. The pull to keep going with something specifically because of what's already been put into it, even when every actual signal says stop. First thing worth knowing, this isn't a rare failure of discipline. Most people do this, repeatedly, often without ever noticing it's happening. It shows up with stocks, with failing businesses, with a gym membership nobody's used in 8 months, with relationships that ended a year before anyone admitted it. Here's the actual mechanism, and it's not really about the money at all. It's about not wanting to admit a loss is final. Once money is spent, it's already gone, whether Noah sells today or in 5 years. Selling doesn't create the loss. It just makes the loss impossible to keep pretending isn't real. That's the part the brain resists, not the math, the finality. The clearest real-world example of this might be an actual airplane. In the 1960s and 70s, the British and French governments kept funding the Concorde supersonic jet program for years after their own internal reports showed it would never turn a profit. The commercial case was already falling apart in the early planning stages. By the time the first passenger flight happened in 1976, both governments already knew ticket sales would never come close to covering what had been spent. It flew anyway, for another 27 years, never once turning a profit across the plane's entire operational life. Not because nobody saw the numbers, because by the time the numbers were undeniable, so much had already been spent that stopping felt like the bigger loss. It became so well documented that economists sometimes call this exact bias the Concorde fallacy. Two governments, with entire teams of expert advisors, fell into the same trap as someone holding one losing stock. The scale was different, the mechanism was identical. There's a second layer to this too, beyond just not wanting to waste what's spent. It's also about not wanting to look inconsistent, even just to yourself. Selling at a loss doesn't just mean admitting money is gone. It means admitting the original decision was wrong. And most people would rather stay quietly wrong than admit it loudly. That's a harder thing to let go of than the dollar amount ever is. This bias isn't unique to money either. Researchers have found the same pattern shaping decisions about health, relationships, even meals people keep eating past the point of being full, simply because they already ordered it. Money just happens to be where it's easiest to measure, and easiest to watch someone lose real, countable dollars over. Here's what this actually costs in a portfolio, not just a country's budget. Investors who hold losing positions specifically to avoid locking in the loss tend to keep doubling down rather than cutting the position. And that pattern is one of the most well-documented ways individual investors underperform the market. Not because they pick worse investments than professionals, because they exit them worse. Noah's $80 stock at $34 isn't really a $46 per share loss anymore. That part already happened, whether he admits it or not. The real, ongoing cost is what that remaining $34 could be doing somewhere else, growing, while it instead sits frozen in a position being held for a reason that has nothing to do with where the stock is actually headed next. Stretch that same instinct, refusing to sell any losing position until it gets back to even, across an entire investing lifetime, And it doesn't just cost the money tied up in a handful of bad calls. It costs the compounding those dollars could have been doing somewhere else instead, for years at a time, which is very often the larger number by the time it's finally added up. The fix isn't never sell at a loss. Sometimes holding is genuinely the correct call. The fix is asking one question that strips the sunk cost out of the decision entirely. If this exact amount of cash showed up with no history attached to it, would I buy this specific position today? Not, do I hope it recovers? Would I choose it, fresh, right now, knowing everything currently known? Here's what that looked like for someone else. Kemi held a losing position for almost 2 years, waiting to get back to even before selling. She finally ran the fresh money test on it, and the honest answer was no, she wouldn't buy it today. She sold, moved the money into something she actually would choose fresh, and by her own account, the hardest part was never the math. It was letting the original loss stay a finished loss instead of an open wound she kept tending. The same test works outside investing too. A failing side business, a degree program that isn't leading anywhere, a subscription nobody opens anymore. The fresh money question doesn't care what kind of sunk cost is involved. It just asks whether today's version of the decision would still get made today, with today's information, by someone with no attachment to yesterday's choice. The sunk cost fallacy doesn't feel irrational while it's happening. It feels like loyalty, like patience, like not giving up too early. That's exactly what makes it so easy to keep doing. The people who actually get out of it aren't the ones who stop caring about their past decisions. They're the ones who stopped needing the future to prove the past decision was right. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, the actual psychology behind the money decisions smart people still get wrong, even really smart governments, that's exactly what this channel is. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.